to Ignoring Adult Responsibilities Part 2. Today, we're pretending I'm a quilting instructor and I'm gonna show you probably how not to make a quilt. So, let's get started. This is what decided the sizes of my t-shirts. This square is already 12.5 by 12.5 inches. That's what we did. You're probably gonna want a sewing machine, but there's an option to hand quilt. Don't do that. Oh, you're also gonna need some thread, a seam ripper, an iron, an ironing board.
Hello, it's editing me. This is just a list of things that I bought to make this quilt with. I didn't necessarily use every single one of these items, but majority of them got used. Do me a favor real quick. Pretend this is a list of items that you could use as a weapon in the Hunger Games. You can only choose one. Tell me in the comments which one you would pick from. Choose your weapon wisely.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into this, but it is a memory quilt or a t-shirt quilt. You can't put a price on nostalgia, right?
So I'd like to take a moment to explain how I got this pattern and how this quilt comes together. Instead of using pictures of my t-shirts to illustrate this point, I'm going to be using pictures of today's fictional character, Pig Harry.
What the fuck?
Styles. Each one of these colored squares represents one of my t-shirts, and I just chose a picture of Harry Styles that corresponds with that color. And here's all the pictures I have of Harry. This quilt is definitely hairy enough, but I think it needs more rainbow. All right, wait, there we go. So here's some little baby pictures of Harry Styles that are at the intersections of these 2-inch gaps that I'm leaving out. And I think in between those, I'm gonna use some intermediate pictures of Harry Styles. So the ones in between will be like a blend of the t-shirts on either side of it itself. Let's look at some more pictures of Harry. Oh, okay. Looking good. Looking great. This may not look like a quilt yet, but you can't say it doesn't have style. All right, now that these other Harrys are all mashed up and stretched and stitched together in a Frankenstein-like format, this was almost it, but not quite. We're gonna have to have a border in here. Oh, he's looking great. He's looking magnificent. I can't wait to see where the rest of this quilt is gonna go. But we need to do a little bit more development and a little bit more explaining, because this shit's complicated. But before it gets complicated, here's the fabric that I picked out to go with Harry Styles outfits. This fabric was purchased from a website called Connecting Threads, a website notorious for quilting fabrics, and I must say they're very high quality at that. They have some of the most fun patterns I've ever seen, and a lot of these I got on sale. Win-win. This might be controversial, but I liked some of these patterns so much that I actually started making a dress out of them. So this last fabric is actually for the back of the quilt. However, this was filmed after the quilt was already assembled, so I apologize. So whenever you're cutting out your fabric, you're gonna wanna leave about a 1/4 inch on every single side to allow room for the seam, aka seam allowance. Just add a 1/2 inch to each side of your rectangle or square, whatever you're cutting out, and that should give you a 1/4 inch on all sides of your pieces.
So, I have already cut out all of my shirts into these little 12.5 inch by 12.5 inch squares. You're gonna have to give me some space.
I know it.
If you're a first-time quilter like me, I'm gonna share some tips from an amateur that I think would be useful for other amateurs. Right now, what I'm doing is I'm tearing the seam out of like half of my work because I was stupid and I did not wait until all my fabric came in. I was just using random thread from just my collection of sewing kits and sewing supplies, and I'm pretty sure all of it's synthetic thread. I learned that cotton thread holds up better and that most people don't use a short enough stitch length on their sewing machine. Make sure that you have everything planned out everything picked out and all that jazz before you start this quilt, because you may change your mind and then you won't have to do all this bullshit like I'm doing right now. So we're gonna go back and redo that just in case we fucked it up, because we probably fucked it up. So satisfying.
PSA, pay attention to this part, please. For the entirety of this quilt, I'd recommend using one of the shorter stitch lengths on your machine for a long-lasting quilt. In my case, number 7. On thread tension, you're going to want to set your lasers to stun. Only use kill in special circumstances.
So about every hour or so, I get this lovely person trying to ruin my crafts, ruin my blanket, ruin my life, ruin it.
Mommy, yes, you're so happy.
I think this is just going to be a battle for the spotlight. Hi, it's 6 hours later. Finally laid out my whole quilt to see how everything looked. I had to also iron all of my fabric. So after you've first sewn part of your fabric together and you've ripped it all apart, you're gonna want to re-iron it and, you know, redo all of it. What I'm gonna do is probably start the top row and like fold it across, like sew all this top row together, and then that skinny second row, so like that one, and then so on and so forth all the way down, and then I'm gonna sew all of them together. So
that is not what I did at all. So you've dismembered your t-shirts and your fabric and you're ready to stitch this bitch together. Normally there should be an order to which you do this. So I've labeled my columns and my rows into numbers and half numbers and letters and small letters. First, I sewed little letter to big letter, little a to big B, and little b to big C, and little c to big D. Big D? I'm sorry. And then I kind of felt bad for column A, so I sewed him to column B, and then I just carried that across to even it out. And then I was like, well, no, we should probably start going down now. And so I started sewing got rid of all the half rows, if you will. So I sewed columns together twice. And then I sewed rows together twice. And then I was left with column A, column B, rows 1, 2, 3, and then I just sewed the remaining 2 columns together and left the 3 chunks so that I could sew on top and bottom pieces of the border, because I didn't want to work with the entire front piece of the quilt. Don't make it hard on yourself. Anyway, I sewed on the tops and the bottom pieces, and then sewed the 3 chunks together, and then attached the 2 side border pieces. And then we had our whole front all stitched together. One big happy family of Harry. Except it wasn't really Harry, it was actually just some old Strat Life t-shirts, but it's still fun. It still has style. So then you start by basting a fabric sandwich together, and then you put some lines on that sandwich, and then you put some more lines on that sandwich in 2 diagonal directions. Then you want to cut off the crust of that sandwich, and then you're going to want to put a different crust back on the sandwich. That different crust is called a binding, and I highly recommend doing a binding, by the way. One small mistake that I made that's going to come up again later, as all of my mistakes do, is don't cut off the crust of your sandwich until you have all of your lines in your sandwich, aka the quilting in your quilt. So make sure your quilting is done before you cut off the edges of your batting and your back fabric, because a lot of times the fabric will shift while you're sewing it. And then you have these overlap issues that aren't really that fun to work with. I might call it the overbite or the underbite of quilting. It's not cute. Anyway, now we've arrived at our finale of the pattern design of our quilt. Aren't they lovely? All of them, all the Harrys. It's time to celebrate. So really this segment of this video is pretty pointless, but I thought it would be fun to watch a time lapse of me just doing something wrong anyway. I'm piling up all my fabric pieces really nice and neat, but what you're really supposed to be doing is folding them basically upside down, right side up, upside down, right side up, so that way the fronts of pieces of fabric and the fronts of pieces of t-shirt are facing each other. And then when you pick up 2 pieces at once, you unfold them like a book, and then you sew them together, like, you know, like a book. I should insert something here to explain what the hell I'm talking about. But anyway, yeah, basically I just piled them up. Eventually everything got sewed in a, you know, semi-decent orientation.
Well, it's been a couple of days, made some progress that I haven't shown, but I will show you guys. You might be asking yourself, where's that sad girl that I just saw a minute ago?
She's still here.
So we're gonna continue making this quilt. I also have some quick tips for you guys. As you're ripping the seams and you get all these little threads, I found it handy to have a lint roller so that you can roll the thread right off the shirt, so you don't have to sit there and just like pluck it all out of the shirt. That's really annoying and takes way too much time. I found that a lot of these little square pieces like stretch quite a bit, and that I've had to undo a lot of these stitches I've made. I have to go back and re-sew these so that they fit these pieces, because they line up like this, you know, and these keep stretching out.
Excuse me, what?
Which is generally not what you want if you want a nice looking quilt. Just a thought. And I've been making a lot of careless mistakes. Stupid. Just like, take your time, don't rush it. That's what I'm starting to learn here. Making sure that your fabric pieces are secure is really important. So you probably need a lot more clips or pins than you think. I might be preaching to the choir, I don't know. This is my journey, this is my truth. And deal with it. So far, this is the size of piece that I've made. So I've sewed the 3 columns together and 2 rows together. So I'm stitching this way, and then now I'm going down before I go all the way across, just to sort of make sure everything lines up vertically before we continue horizontally, because I don't want to get too far and I have way too much to undo. I feel like I'm going to end up with a nightmarish grid problem if I don't start progressing down as I'm going across. That's my theory. I could be completely wrong. Move on that.
So right here, I just start having a lot of alignment problems. As you can see, I've marked the backs of my fabric with lines and pin so that I could see exactly where the needle was going to end up when I was sewing. But due to the fact that my t-shirts were stretching as I was sewing, they weren't lining up, and I was getting really frustrated. Oh look, and here's where I make the biggest mistake of this entire project and don't see it for like weeks.
Hey. Oh my gosh.
The takeaway here is to actually buy some t-shirt backing so your t-shirts don't stretch while you're sewing them. And then you can completely avoid this problem and not want to tear your hair out because you've had to re-sew multiple pieces over and over again to try to get them to line up.
So this is the progress we've made so far. You can see which ones I've sewn together. That's a panel, and so on. And now I'm going to continue what I've done up here, which is make this big square. So I'm going to sew those 2 together, these 2, these 2, yada yada yada.
Oh, hello. Hey back there. What are you doing? It's the fluffy one. Hey. Oh, what are you doing? Update. I have a couple more seams to sew. I'm starting to work on the edges. Sew these pieces hello. Sew these pieces together. We're just working towards those final few seams. Gonna update probably when it's all put together. I'm very tired. Probably shouldn't have stayed up until 3 a.m. 3 nights in a row. Stupid. I'm really proud about how it's turning out. It's going to be a huge quilt, which is so great. There's no such thing as too much blanket. I'm really pumped to reveal the front. Stay tuned. Here I'm just showing that my back fabric was multiple pieces that I had to sew together. That's really it. Come on. Go on. Come on. Lexi. Go. Shoot.
God. Like almost done sewing the large panels together, but Lexi is sitting on my other 2 panels. Move! Move! Don't you know? No! Get out of here! I'm telling you no. What are you doing? Run! Hey, no!
We're doing it on purpose.
Mochi, I am done. Get. No, go away. Go away. Hey. Hey!
Did you learn what basting was in this segment? Me neither.
And I'm shaking.
Allow me to remind you of the very crucial tip at this point. Do not cut the crust off your sandwich until you've actually quilted that sandwich together. You know, like when you take a bite out of a hamburger and you have like nothing but bun or bread left in your hands? That's like kind of what happens here. You know, your last few bites are just bread because the meat got like pushed to the front of your sandwich. Does that make sense? Just do what I'm telling you, okay?
So it's been like, I don't know how long it's been since I filmed. Last I filmed was making the horizontal stitches in the top of the quilt, and I'm now at the bottom of the quilt. This is what we have at the bottom. There's this like massive gap between this, oh shit, massive gap between the cotton batting and the edge of.
You see all that bread left in my hand? You see all that? It's like a sandwich. When you accidentally push the meat to the front of it. This is the dumbest metaphor.
My cat is walking on pins and needles, literally. Don't sit. So I guess I'm gonna stitch another piece of billing in the edge so I don't have to cut all this off. I don't know yet. I'm thrilled to be dealing with this problem. I mean, I'm having a similar problem on the side. Anyway. Well, I'm tired. This concludes first part of this vlog. It's definitely not a tutorial. And that sound is definitely not from a real fire. There's also nothing in this cup. Anyway, there's a lot more to come in part 2. I mean, you're gonna miss the finished quilt if you don't watch part 2. I don't know what to say here. You know what? Leave a like and subscribe. If you just want to watch me try things all the time, there's definitely more where that came from. Let me know what other content you'd like to see. I like feedback, as long as it's constructive. You know what? That's it. Goodbye.